Hey, what's up, everyone? One of our listeners requested that we chat about learning how to drive in school. Well, we didn't have access to driver's education through school. We have a few ideas of things that we wanted to discuss today. Let's hop in.
One of the topics that you had listed we should try to talk about is the idea of having driver's ed in high school as an elective. I want to mention this because this also ties into the different options of transit, like public transit or private, like driving your own personal vehicle or commercial. Um, I think if we had that as an option, either as an elective or even as a required course, I probably would have put in more priority of wanting to get my driver's license instead of putting it off forever. Like I'm something I need to get around to doing again. My provincial ID is to expire at some point soon, so I need to get around to doing that. So I might tackle that at the same time. My sibling, they wanted to get their license done ASAP, so they actually had missed school on their birthday, on their 16th birthday, to go and get their license done.
Yeah,
So
my sister was the same way. She took her L test right when she turned 16 and then went in for her and the first minute that she could.
yeah, you also, I would want to just mention this too, to keep in mind that not everywhere has easy to access public transit like the Lower Mainland or Vancouver does. In Oklahoma, where my sibling lives, there's not really options for that. You have to drive to get around. So if you're not able to drive, you have to be dependent on someone else taking you everywhere, and that's not fair on others. So
Well,
I would like to think that it would have been nice to have that as either as an elective or a required course when I was in high school.
yeah, and I mean, even some places in the lower mainland, we have transit, but it's not super accessible transit. Like, if you go out to like Maple Ridge and stuff, it's really hard to get out there on transit. I think with the new SkyTrain line, well, the newer SkyTrain line, it's a bit easier now, but via bus, it's not very accessible. And the further out areas of Surrey, further away from the SkyTrain, also aren't very accessible because the buses don't run very often and they're not very reliable.
Well, one thing to keep in mind too is you don't necessarily need to have a car when you have your license, but at the very least, if you need to have that option of being able to rent a car, obviously you have to be of a certain age too. But at least knowing that you're able to drive and rent a car is should there be a need, you have that as an option. Whereas if you're in like my situation where you're in your late 20s and still don't really have your driver's license, and just it ends up delaying more the longer you put it off, because already at least in BC you have to do your, it's now more like a computerized test. Mostly you have to wait at least a year before you can do your road test, and that's only if you pass it on the first time. I think right now, because of COVID, instead of like waiting a day to go back again, you have to wait a week, plus you have to book an appointment to do so. And that's if you miss it the first time, you have to do it a second time, then you have to probably repeat the process a few number of times depending on how many times you flunk the test. But definitely it is something you might want to consider getting done as soon as you can. So if you're in high school listening to this and considering dealing with your license, I recommend taking advantage of doing it during that period of time, because you don't have as much responsibilities as you would as like a college student or a young adult. You probably would have more time in your hands to deal with that.
Well, I don't know if it has to do with age or the fact that I had my license before, but I have my L now, and I looked when I got my actual card and saw the first date that I could have gotten my test done. It was actually the same day I took my L test this time around. So I don't know if that's an age thing or because I had my learners before, but I had it many, many years ago because I got it when I could first get my learners, and then I didn't renew it for many years. Um,
So I was
I
I
like
was
Aaron, where I didn't want to get my license. I was not motivated to get my license until I was 18, and my dad was like, "Seriously, this is ridiculous. You're getting your license." He bought me the book I had to study, and I went out begrudgingly. pass the test, what was it that you were like, I gotta get my license right away? Because I'll never understand the desire as a young person to get behind a big giant vehicle, but I was also
Oh.
afraid of everything. So what was it for you that was like, yeah, I can totally do this? Is it that it was just time? That was what everybody was doing? Was it something where like you specifically were wanting independence? Like what was it and how could school have helped with that?
Well, for me, it was my older sister already had her license, and I felt like it was the thing that you do. But and I probably would have gotten my actual license then too. I had somebody who was a really good teacher, but my father was a very bad teacher.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, he actually grabbed the steering wheel several times, and I went, I'm never going out with you again.
Oh my goodness.
And my mom has depth perception issues. So she gets really anxious in the passenger seat. She's a very good driver, but she leaves a lot of extra space and she gets anxious about the space that other people leave. So, so she didn't really feel equipped to help me learn to drive. So yeah, I didn't really have a good teacher and I wasn't confident when I had my learners. My sister was very confident. She went out with our father and just she was also much better at telling him off and putting him in his place.
Yeah.
So she went out with him and practiced and then just got her N. Whereas for me, I could do it with him. So having a teacher who was more equipped to teach me and wasn't going to grab the steering wheel would have been probably very helpful at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I had tried to get my license done before, and my dad, his vehicle that he had at the time was a van. So when I would try to practice driving it, it was an automatic, but it felt like I was working with a big butt behind me, and I just wasn't very comfortable or confident with it. Also, from watching my dad teach my younger sister, he does tend a bit more the yelling thing, and my sister was a little bit like Kayla's sibling too, where she probably tell him off a little bit. But yeah, I just from even watching that, I was intimidated and I didn't really want to do it. I tried it with him a couple times, it just didn't work. And then when I tried with my mom, the vehicle she had at the time was a standard. So
Yeah.
you had to deal with the clutch and such, and I could barely move around a mall parking lot trying with her car. It was a smaller size, which I was more comfortable with, but because it was a standard, I just was not working with it well. It was not wanting to work with me, and I just couldn't really do with it. We did do driving lessons. The guy I worked with was pretty nice. Unfortunately, after a time, my license expired and just didn't get around to really getting back into it for a while. Yes, so it's a couple of things similar to what Kayla had said. There's some overlap on similar things. I think now, since then, my mom has changed to a vehicle that actually can do both automatic and standard.
Ooh.
But I need to first off get my license again and then get a few more lessons done first before she can put me on the insurance to be able to practice driving in her vehicle.
Oh yeah, that's right, because the rules recently changed.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yep. Anybody who is going to have even possibly be driving your vehicle, if they are in the same house, they have to be on your insurance. And your insurance rates go by whoever the most expensive person on your insurance would be. So a learner costs a lot of money. Unless you get your own car and you're on disability, and then we get some pretty cool discounts. I got rid of my bus pass um and so the disability bus pass is $52 a month and disability insurance for a small car is $81 a month. So I'm only really paying like an extra just under $30 a month for insurance since I got rid of my bus pass.
So that's a worthy trade for you.
Yeah, I was given my car. So I just canceled my bus pass and then I get an extra $52 a month from not having the bus pass. But yeah, like if they had the class in school for those who can't afford to pay for driving classes outside of the school, um, it would be really helpful to have it in there as a course. Because I mean, most of the kids I went to school with got their license as soon as they could. Like I swear every time, but everyone by the time I was in grade 11 had a car and was driving.
A lot of my
Um,
friends were too, and I was constantly trying to bum rides. And thinking back about it, I'm like, you I was like 2 blocks away from you, and you were constantly saying no.
yeah, I didn't have any friends who had cars, but most of the kids in my school had cars.
My sister was similar, where she would either give her friends rides or her friends would give her rides to school. Yeah.
So yeah, if you have a friend with a car that who would give you a ride, that would be really nice. I think having the driver's ed class in school would be really good because it would help those who can't afford to pay outside of school and don't have great teachers at home to be able to get their license and get more independent.
It also helps with finding work, for example, because you can't always depend on public transit to get to a job. Some jobs it helps or they require that you be able to drive a vehicle, for example. If you're not able to find work within your living area or within a certain area that and you have to commute out, sometimes you don't always have the public transit as an option. Like my dad has had various jobs that requires him to be on the road, so he would need a vehicle to drive. So the later you put it off, the harder it gets to like finding a relatively good paying job. Because if you have to limit yourself to public transit, you may not get as either as good of a job or one that pays relatively well, especially if you want to live more on your own or more independently.
Yeah,
It's
it
not well.
definitely opens more options for jobs and everything if you can get your license. That's what's kind of motivated me at this point in my life to get my license because I'm like, I need to be able to find a good job, but I can't travel to most of the good jobs on transit or on my scooter. Yeah,
I mean, even when I was a teenager, I didn't drink. I was always the person that didn't drink, but I also didn't drive, so I wasn't any help to my friends.
Right, you couldn't be the designated driver because you couldn't drive.
Exactly. Driver's ed used to be a thing in high school. Did you guys ever have driver's ed in your high school?
No, I don't think so. Not at my school.
no, we never had the option at my school, which I think is really silly because we had an auto shop where they fixed up old cars and actually got them running. And they could have used those old cars to do the driver's ed after they were fixed up, I feel like.
It still seems like an odd placement of resources. I'm totally with you on that. That's a bit of a head scratcher.
Well, also too, you have to think about your school location. Like you may not necessarily have the area or the space
Yeah.
to actually be able to do that.
There were a lot of really good back roads just in behind my school, though, right off of where the auto shop actually was.
What? Oh man, things are so weird. I really wish our teachers had thought about the beings that they were sending out into the roads.
Maybe they should have included that in the planning course as, hey, just a heads up kind of tip. You might want to consider getting your driver's license during high school instead of putting it off till like during or post college.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's an idea.
yeah, yeah. They definitely never talked about how more difficult it could be to get a job without a license.
Definitely, definitely something we should have all been exposed to younger. That does it for today's episode. Do you drive? Why or why not? And do you think driving lessons should be a part of post-secondary education? Let us know what you think in the comments, and always, if you have other ideas or topics for us that you'd like us to discuss, or if you want to be a guest on the show, shoot us over an email to voa@pacificautismfamily.com. We look forward to more of your great questions. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you soon.